Coming up around the nation, Florida A&M announced last Wednesday that the director of athletics, Courtney Gaucher, has stepped down amidst a significant amount of controversy. Tennessee State is ready to cash in on the big bucks, a $1 million payday to visit Notre Dame for a nationally televised season opener on NBC. And a new documentary is coming out that will chronicle the only three-time NAIA national champions who were led by a legendary HBCU baller and a Hall of Fame coach. The bus is cranked up and we're ready to roll. It's the HBCU Sports Nation, and we're pulling out now.
Black out and move. Ride, come on. Black college, stand up. HBCU.
All right, what's the deal, boys and girls? It's the HBCU OG Mark Gray. Thanks for hanging out with us. Remember, follow us, Smash Entertainment on YouTube. Like and subscribe right here. Look, we got a lot of news to get to in a little bit of time. So let's kick off. Florida A&M is in the market for a new athletics director after Courtney Gaucher stepped down abruptly. Gaucher had been ahead of the curve on marketing and branding opportunities, which had brought more revenue and visibility to the program since he took over in 2019. But according to the Rattler blog, around March of 2021, he helped to orchestrate a 6-year partnership between FAMU and LeBron James in association with Nike brand. And more recently, he partnered with Twitter to introduce the first HBCU Twitter community for FAMU. He also played a major role in the Rattlers athletic program, moving from the floundering MEAC into the super conference that is the SWAC. Now, this reportedly involves a multi-year broadcast rights deal that Gaucher allegedly brokered with Urban Edge Networks. That happened in February, and it featured all university-related content. However, according to reports, the deal was apparently done without being reviewed by university officials. Those officials included his direct supervisor, who was supposedly unaware, and that violated the terms of his employment agreement. FAMU has since then replaced him with Michael Smith as the interim athletic director. The blog also reported that Florida A&M officials were unaware that UEN and HBCU League Pass had entered FAMU's branded NASCAR vehicle in the Pennzoil 400 stock car race on March 6th in Las Vegas. But if there's a silver lining in the cloud for Gaucher, but apparently head coach Willie Simmons has his former boss's back, and he took to let the world know through it the way everybody does these days via Twitter, writing, "In all my years working in intercollegiate athletics, I've never witnessed someone do so much with so little in such a short amount of time. Your visionary leadership matched with your genuine care for the welfare of the student athletes makes you a generational talent as athletic directors. We'll take this story up upon further review." According to the Nashville Tennessean, Tennessee State will get crazy paid when they travel to Notre Dame to face the Irish next year in a historic matchup. The Irish will guarantee the Tigers football program a $1 million payday for the 2023 season opener that not only breaks them off financially, but it will air coast to coast on NBC. Not the streaming service called the Peacock, but the big coast to coast network on free TV. Tennessee State coach and former Heisman Trophy winner Eddie George and Notre Dame's first-year head coach Marcus Freeman were teammates at The Ohio State University. And George's homie from back in the day is clearly doing him a solid financially. And from a publicity standpoint, when you consider Tennessee State is rarely, if ever, despite moving to the Ohio Valley Conference, on national TV. But Notre Dame's athletic department has already capitalized on the popularity of being associated with the HBCU movement. You'll remember last February, they took on Howard University in the nation's capital. That speaks to just how far the visibility and credibility of HBCU sports has come since the unfortunate and untimely death of George Floyd. Stay with us. We got more of what you came here for on the other side as we talk with George Willis, a former New York Post columnist turned executive producer of a documentary on the only three-time HBCU national basketball champion. That's as we continue our roll around the HBCU Sports Nation.
Blackout the room. Ride, come on. Black College, stand up. HBC.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Joined right now by accomplished sports writer turned executive producer and documentarian. Been on this guy for a long time. He is George Willis, former columnist at the New York Post, but now his documentary, Dream Whisperer, is about to chronicle one of the untold legacies in HBCU sports, that of a gentleman named Dick Barnett. George, been a long time, my friend. How are you?
Mark, I'm doing well. Good to talk to you.
It's good to talk to you and see you, man. And I promise we won't talk Yankees or Knicks at all right?
All right.
And certainly not the Jets.
That's cool. That's cool.
But
I'll deal with that. I haven't had to think about them for a while.
How about that? Anyway, Dream Whisperer is a fascinating documentary looking at the life of one of the great HBCU performers that kind of has fallen under the historic radar screen. What made it the right time to chronicle the exploits of Dick Barnett?
Well, you have to remember, Mark, this documentary was 9 years in the making. So it started out basically with Dick wanting to get his team recognized for what it accomplished in 1957, 58, and 59, which was winning 3 consecutive NAIA national championships. They were the first college team to three-peat in any type of tournament whatsoever. So Dick thought that legacy needed to be acknowledged, the first all-Black school to win an integrated tournament, and was worthy of induction into the Naismith Hall of Fame. So he began this quest in 2011. One of the people he reached out to was myself. I was the columnist at the New York Post at that particular time, and he told me what his mission was, and I did a column on it, and that piqued the interest of a gentleman by the name of Ed Peskowitz, who decided it might make a good documentary. So from that time on, there were cameras on Dick as he pursued this quest to get his team recognized and inducted into the Naismith Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame. Nobody thought it would take 9 years. Everybody thought maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years. After 4 or 5, it got to be, is this thing ever going to happen? And it took 9 years for them to finally get inducted in 2019. And so this documentary chronicles not only the team and the era for which they accomplished this, civil rights era, Jim Crow era, everything that was going on at that particular time, segregation, all those issues to do what this team accomplished was magical in itself. And then the three-peat under it, and then the talent that was there, but then to have to lobby so hard to get recognition. That is part of what the documentary is about, and Dick's persistence all along the way.
George, this is a gentleman who played for, Coach McClendon.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start looking at the legacy of fast break basketball and innovations of the game, there was nobody that was ahead of the basketball curve like John McClendon. Can you talk about how that relationship with Dick Barnett and John McClendon sort of played out on this magical road to 3 straight NAIA championships?
Well, you can only really touch on that. One thing that comes through in the documentary is Dick's talent. Obviously, he was the 2-time MVP of that particular tournament. And when he was going to school, somebody asked him what his grade point was. He said 25 a game. And so that basically was his approach to school. And there was a little conflict with McClendon, who was a man who was demanding and wanted his players, to be accountable. And he used to run them a lot, and he'd be driving in his car, and the players would be running behind him, trying to get in shape. So there was a little bit of conflict early, but once they got on the same page, they formed a magical connection, and everybody knows, John McClendon and how special he was as a coach and as an innovator and as a pioneer. And you could do a whole documentary on him, certainly. But certainly that was a great impact to get Dick to Tennessee State and build that team that he built that was able to become their first college team to three-peat in the national tournament.
Is it safe to say that for John McClendon, he was to, I guess, Tennessee A&I, now Tennessee State, would say Earl the Pearl Monroe was to Winston-Salem State, historically speaking?
Yeah, well, McClendon being the coach and Dick being the player, it's just, the one thing about that is and I think that's why it took so long for this team to be recognized, was that after those 3 years, the program almost kind of sort of fell off the map. And those championships went by the wayside. Whereas, the programs you're talking about sort of sustained themselves in the 60s and 70s and were powerhouses. But certainly Dick was, and people remember him, and his picture is still in the auditorium there. They called him Skull back then, but it's a legacy that was basically forgotten. And that's part of this documentary too, forgotten, not just in the annals of the people voting for the Hall of Fame, but forgotten by the school itself. There was not a lot of recognition at Tennessee State for this team. Hardly anybody knew the legacy of that team, whether it were students or even members of the college basketball team at that particular time. Had never heard of what the team accomplished, barely heard of maybe Dick Barnett, that's it. So that was part of this documentary too, was to help the younger people understand, whose shoulders they stand on. And I think this is a valuable history lesson in this documentary. It's not just about, one guy trying to get his team recognized. There are several messages within this documentary, and one of them is today's youth, college kids, people who are going to these historic universities, to have a better idea of what was accomplished there, not just, a decade ago or 2 decades ago, but as far back, especially the time of civil rights and Jim Crow, and what they had to go through to play basketball, and what they had to endure so that players today can enjoy what they enjoy and complain about what they complain about.
we know that in the on the shoulders of fighting through racism, there was a civil rights movement in each individual market, whether you're dealing with citizens in Greensboro, down in Birmingham, you had the fire hoses and the dogs. What kind of, for lack of a better term, personal assaults, if you will, did the guys who were competing and doing great things in Nashville had to endure that Dick may have been a part of? Was he a part of civil activism and all that?
Well, he talks about winning the first one in 1957 and having to come back to Nashville and take part in the sit-in, in the lunch counters, because I think he does the narration in the documentary, which is very powerful. And so it's his words talking about how they had just won the national championship and he had to come back to Nashville right away because he had to address the ugly face of racism. And he talks about that as well. He talks about going to school, first year when they lynched Emmett Till. So, that's the backdrop he's talking about when he played college basketball and what his team had to endure using the bathroom in cornfields and staying at people's houses. They didn't stay in hotels, they stayed at people's houses that would welcome them. And they didn't have the kind of accommodations that other teams had. And still they were able to win championships.
George Willis is our guest. He joins us right now, former columnist with the New York Post. And would it be safe to call you executive producer or associate producer?
Well, that's what the credits say, so I'm going to go with it.
Executive producer, the control, the Dick Wolf of the Dick Barnett story.
Right.
How about that? As we continue here on the HBCU Sports Nation, let's pay it forward then and remember how significant a player he was with the New York Knicks. Let's talk about his legacy, his greatness in the NBA. He speaks of the jump shot. Talk about his creativity. What made him special as a player?
Well, that team was special. I mean, whenever they talk about those Knicks teams that won the championship, the word team is very meaningful when you talk about them. They had individuals who fit certain roles on that team, whether it was Willis Reed or Dave the Butcher or Bradley. Everybody had specific roles. And Clyde, Clyde, you can even tell what Clyde was today. He was that guard who was smooth and silky and would just kill you anytime he kind of felt like it. Dick was a little bit of that dog kind of guy, the little black sheep. He ruffled the feathers, He wanted to keep an edge. He probably maintained the edge on the team as well. But he had, the fabulous jump shot, the fallback baby jump shot, great defensive player. That he was sort of the glue of that team and underappreciated as well. They put all the jerseys in the rafters and Dick was one of the last ones to go up. And players like Clyde had to lobby to get his number lifted into the rafters. So he was a little bit underappreciated because he was, he liked to make the edges a little rough. And he did so in pursuit of this mission of getting this Tennessee State team inducted into the Hall of Fame. He wasn't always so politically correct in that endeavor as well.
So was that like part of a chip that he carried, having been a successful champion at Tennessee State and having to endure racism? And then, I mean, he was, as the young kids say, he was getting it in as a player now. Mm-hmm. His stat line historically is one of the best.
Right.
So I'm trying to figure out where that burning desire, because a lot of the great legendary players who certainly came from HBCUs, who certainly had to endure some things, quite frankly, that certainly this generation doesn't appear. Did that fuel him in a way that kind of gave him an edge, that sort of created a false perception about him? Or was he that,
Yeah, absolutely. He talks about basketball being his mistress. He was all about basketball and balling, and he wasn't really trying to make friends. He was a loner, basically, was by himself a lot. And, he wasn't into the hoopla and, having a entourage or a posse or anything like that. So he was about basketball. And I think that's why he is who he is. He's Dick Barnett, Dr. Dick Barnett, and he's a little different. But you got to be a little different to be as successful as he has been.
Yeah, he's certainly great, and most of them do. And in a year where we had Ben Wallace become the first undrafted player to go into the Hall of Fame, and he went to Winston-Salem State. You had Bobby Dandridge, who finally, after 30 years, went into the Hall of Fame. It just seems like there's some kind of link that I haven't been able to wrap my arms around.
Mm-hmm.
Do you sense that there's a common thread amongst players like that who came from small, historically Black colleges, who played with such an edge about them? And even when you look at the contemporary edge that Ben Wallace played with, does he make any light about what that was about in this documentary?
Well, not particularly too much, because the focus is on them playing basically the white teams they played in the NAIA tournament. But you can, I'm sure it was basically the same. Dick approached it the same way, because there's discussion about that first year. They were seeded 32 out of a 32 team tournament. So they were seeded last, and they played the top seed. And Dick Barnett looked straight at their best player and said, "You're fixing to go home, don't you?" So I'm sure he approached any game like that, and it was always having to prove yourself. I think it goes today as well. You have to prove yourself every time you get on that court, whether you're playing, in an HBCU game or you're playing whomever. And, HBCUs are only going to get better and more talented now, because people are starting to recognize a little bit and starting to understand there's talent there.
I call it a cultural awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get the sense right now that the new generation has been culturally woke,
Mm-hmm.
and in so doing, that this is a long-term seismic shift in terms of top tiers, shall we call them, blue chip talent, recognizing that HBCUs are a first option, or is it just a current thing?
No, because I think there's organizations like, I'm going to go to the PGA of America, because I'm going to be covering the National Minority Golf Championship in 2 weeks here in Philadelphia. PGA is pumping money into that tournament that they've never pumped money into before. You talk to them and they mention George Floyd a lot, and trying to find ways of not just talking about it, but actually doing something about it. And usually the first place these organizations and these companies think about is HBCUs. So I think HBCUs are going to benefit from corporations or whoever, maybe sports entities, Fortune 500 companies, whoever they might be, pumping money into programs that eventually help bring HBCU programs on a level to where they compete for the best talent in the country. And I hope it's not just something that lasts 4 or 5 years, or one grade through. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of these programs are earmarked for 3 years, 4 years, and if they don't renew the program and renew the funding, or renew the sponsorship, whether it just being something simple as a collegiate golf tournament, if they pull the money back from that, then it goes back to being less than what it was. If they keep the money there, then the players there are exposed to another level of the game and of the industry, and that starts to trickle up. And so I hope that this is not just a temporary thing, that this is an awakening, and people are understanding that there's a lot of benefit there.
What do you, as executive producer, hope that the audience gains from spending time, investing, watching this movie?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. You hope they understand the historical significance of the team, and just have an appreciation of the team, have an appreciation of Dick for persevering and having a mission and standing fast and seeing doors slammed in his face and still going on and on and on. And finally, the dream comes true. That can be applied in a lot of different circumstances. So people might be helped in that regard, whatever they might be pursuing, and take a lesson from this man and how he went at it and finally achieved what he did. I think that's a great message in itself. The other thing is just have appreciation for back in the day, how tough it was compared to now, how much better it is, and how everybody sort of needs to still enjoy a piece of the pie, and there's still work to be done, because it shouldn't have taken 9 years for the team to get inducted. Why did that happen? Let's examine that and see if there's something there that needs to be changed, because maybe there does. Maybe there does need to be some change.
Yeah, it just makes you wonder how it takes 9 years for you to do a documentary in hopes of this team that gets remembered for more than, 60 years ago at this particular juncture. And that's yeoman work by you, my friend. Emotionally speaking, long-term projects like this become a labor of love. They really become a part of your intestinal fortitude for the rest of your life. What'd you gain from this?
Well, this is the first time I've been in any kind of project like this. Mostly I'm a pad and pencil guy, sit down in front of a computer with my tape recorder and start writing a story. But to see a film put together, and it's been a long process, and you never knew how long it was going to take. There was always revisions here, revision there. We didn't start with Dick doing the narration. It was somebody else doing the narration a long time ago. Dick was probably like the fifth option when everybody went, that sounds pretty good. So we did that, and just take things. And the first film was about 2 hours long. That was too long. So you had to chop that down, and you just get an appreciation for how this thing develops, and you really don't know what it's going to look like until later on. And once you start to see it sort of come together, then you get excited about it. And you just hope, a lot of people get to see it, because I think it's a good film. It's a different kind of film.
Okay, so how are you distributing it, and when will it drop?
Well, it's going to premiere at the Pan-African Film Festival in Los Angeles on April 30th. And so we're still looking for a platform after that where it's going to be featured. There's been some interest by, different areas, but, we'll see where it goes after that. Hopefully it'll get a good response at the film festival, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, I hope this is not one of those films that struggles to get mass distribution, because as far as sports documentaries are concerned, this, again, if you're really about bringing to light untold stories, stories of Tennessee A&I, that would be Tennessee State for my friends in Nashville, is a glorious legacy. And I guess you could say it's playing out right now with Robert Covington in the league right now, as I believe the only HBCU player who's picking up a paycheck right now in the association. That's kind of a interesting twist to that. Yeah.
I mean, it should be more players like that, because they've always been some of our best players in the NBA.
He is George Willis, ladies and gentlemen, accomplished sports columnist, formerly with the New York Post, and now documentarian. It is a fascinating look at the inside of a great legacy, and really it's a twofold legacy. Tennessee State and John McClendon, who I don't think are either appreciated, and not to mention Dick Barnett. I mean, that's we forget how great he was as a player too. I mean,
and quiet as a cat, he should be in the Hall of Fame too.
Right. I mean, let's be real for a second. Everybody's talking about Steph Curry is the best shooter of all time. Yeah. I would have loved to have seen him have a 3-point shot when Dick Barnett was playing, and we might have really had a 3-point battle during All-Star weekend. You know what I mean?
Exactly. He still got it a little bit too. You see it in the film.
Well, that's great. Hey, George, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Thanks for doing the work that you do. And we look forward to catching Dream Whisperer when it drops. on a cable TV channel, a sports network, or these days, the streaming networks, which
Right.
are a boom for indies like yourself. And God bless you, my friend. Look forward to catching up with you real soon.
Thank you. We'll have updates on Twitter and Instagram. They can find the Dream Whisperer information there.
And I mean this sincerely. When I was coming along, there was like a holy grail of, Black beat writers.
Mm-hmm.
And New York was killing it. My man Rob Parker was there. Stephen A. was there.
Yeah.
Curtis Bunn was there. Bill Rhoden was there. You were there. Boy, wasn't a whole lot of minutes on the bench over there, bro. Y'all starters was holding it down for real.
Right.
That was a great time. Thanks again. Look forward to doing it again.
All right, Mark. Anytime.
Stick with us. We got more of what you came here for. It's the HBCU Sports Nation.
1, 2, 3, hit it! Black out and move. Ride, come on! Black college, stand up! HBCU!
Upon further review, at some point the arrogance of your own ignorance has to get out of the way of the greatness of your athletic program. And such is the story with Florida A&M right now. When an athletic director, at least on the surface, seems to be bringing more shine and dead presidents to the program, and he's working on ways to capitalize on its brand to restore its place amongst the great FCS programs nationwide, when do cooler heads prevail? I mean, Rattler Nation, you got a football program on the verge of a Black College National Championship, and you force the AD out who's built the program and who appears to be operating in the best interest of it? Maybe it's time to rethink the overall mentality of where you're going with your program. I mean, it seems like anybody not only connected with the program or the university who is somewhat successful is never truly appreciated. Now remember, as an OG, I remember when Dr. Fred Humphreys was president of the university. I can't remember a man who got so much hate for leading his school to becoming Time Magazine's National College of the Year. Then there's, of course, the legend of Rudy Hubbard, the first person to win a national FCS or Division I AA football championship then. Not even a foot long. 3, 2, 1. Not even a footnote in the pantheon of HBCU sports history these days. I mean, think about it. They arbitrarily ran the great Ken Riley. Yeah, Cincinnati Bengals, former cornerback, played in the Super Bowl, that Ken Riley. For doing what? Only being a consistent, competitive, championship caliber team in the MEAC. And oh yeah, by the way, have we forgotten the greatness of Billy Joe, who was within a game of playing for the national championship and almost knocked off Jim Tressel when he was at Youngstown State? Oh, and I forgot, there's that thing that y'all just couldn't get along with, Joe Taylor, who came from Hampton as the winningest coach in ME's AC history. Why? Because he wasn't a FAMU guy. Now, Courtney Gaucher has been pushed out the door for some arbitrary paperwork decisions that have nothing to do with wins, losses, or compliance. It is amazing. If anything, he's guilty of procedural misconduct. Could they have been mistakes? Was there anything nefarious that you found going on beneath the surface? It's clear, many things may have changed in Tallahassee, but the mindset hasn't. FAMU's arrogance of their own ignorance continues in athletics, and it continues to hold the brand back. And that's a bad thing for HBCU sports, because our game is always at its healthiest when the Rattlers are ready to strike. and strike and strike and represent big time on the national stage. Anxious to hear from you, boys and girls. Give it up. Follow me, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at The Sports Groove. And remember to share and like and subscribe down here. Thanks for hanging out with us. I'm your HBCU OG, Mark Gray. And we'll leave the light on for you as you travel around the HBCU Sports Nation.
1, 2, 3, hit it! Black College.